Vicky. I'm also a domestic violence survivor. I was abused by my husband, ex-husband now. He was physical, mental, sexual, financial, and spiritually abusive. He would use the Bible to justify his abuse, whereas it didn't apply to me. So I'm excited that to launch the YouTube and the Facebook pages and really start getting the word out. We've worked really, really hard the last couple of years to get to this point. Sometimes it felt like it was slow going, but it's all God's timing, and He's made it. Corona has made an upswing here.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed us to get a different view of what we even saw dream becoming.
That is correct. So, and the last person I want to introduce, you can't see him, but it is my husband who's behind the scenes, Brandon. He has gone involved in domestic violence advocacy as me and his relationship has grown, and he is very much interested in abuse prevention. He's interested in helping male domestic violence survivors, so shout out to him. And we can't wait to see our ministry grow from here.
Right. And
Yeah. So, the live stream will go on until 5:30. So stay tuned, and I have my little cheat sheet here so that I don't forget what I'm supposed to talk about. And we welcome any questions you may have to our guest speakers. We are going to be paying attention to who posts in our audience. And then the goal of the live stream is to introduce community resources to the Shreveport-Bossier area. And this is because when I was going through my domestic violence case, I didn't know there were so many resources in Shreveport-Bossier. I didn't know about the Family Justice Center or PCI or other counseling centers. I didn't know there were so many advocates and survivors. In fact, when I first met Vicky, I felt like, yay, there's more people that have gone through this than just me, and I'm not alone. So,
right. Yeah, when my case ended, my abuse ended in New Mexico, but when I returned to Louisiana, back to Shreveport, back home, I was a mess and didn't know who to contact, what to do. My mother didn't know what to do with me. And I went to a city hall meeting or town hall meeting, and Project Celebration was there. And that's a resource that's there. The value there. There's not a monetary value to this organization. They are priceless in what they do for our community and the surrounding parishes. It's not just Caddo Bossier for PCI, and we're going to learn a little more about them as the day goes on. But yeah, sometimes you feel like you're by yourself and there's no one that understands. But there's a community of survivors that you start to find, and there's lots of people in Shreveport-Bossier that are professionals that want to help and are here for you. And I look forward to speaking with them today and getting to know even more and bringing y'all the new information.
Yeah. So when I was going through my domestic violence case, I filed a restraining order. I quit talking to my father for a very long period of time. And by the time I came to our current church, which is Celebration Church, I just quit talking about what I had gone through because I felt like I was shut out by so many people who just didn't want to hear my story. So the only people I would honestly tell were my married family, because I felt like they were closer to my family than even my actual blood relatives were. And it was then that my mother-in-law heard about Vicky's story. And how about you tell that, Sykas?
Well, I had gone to an altar call and had prayed, and then I think maybe the next Sunday I had gone into the cafe to buy a coffee, and Drina and Guy Dodson ran the cafe at that time, and we got to talking and kind of told them a little bit about my story, not all the details, but enough. And over a few weeks and months, we built a relationship, and one day Drina, after coffee, said, "I really think you need to meet my daughter-in-law." And I said, "Absolutely, we can get together for coffee." And then it was just like sisterhood after that. We formed our new club.
Yes.
And we've added people through the last 2 years of our survivorship. And I love each and every person that's come through our program. And each one of them's a blessing, and they're a blessing to the community, and what they now do as advocates or speakers to tell their story and to get that out there to let other people know they're not alone. And I'm so glad that Drina had introduced us.
I am too. I had actually gone to California to an organization called Break the Silence. They had a women's retreat that occurred once a year, I believe. I don't know if they brought it up to twice a year, but I went to one of their women's retreats for domestic violence survivors in 2014, and that was the first time I could openly share my story and I didn't get horrified stares back, and it wasn't awkward. And so when I left California and came back to Shreveport, I still felt alone, even though I had all of my virtual, I call them BTS sisters, Break the Silence sisters. So that it was nice to have that support group, but I still felt alone in Shreveport because I didn't know if anybody else went through what I went through. So it was such a blessing to meet you when I finally realized I'm not alone, and I'm not alone in the church.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and we did get lucky with our church.
Yes.
They're very accepting, and so you never felt re-victimized there. And leading the small groups, the church has been really supportive of anything we've done in order to get Dream off the ground, and helping other survivors. During our women's conference, the church has taken up special donations to give to Project Celebration to lift up these women that are going through what we did.
Yes.
And thankfully survived. Today you'll probably hear some stories that are heartbreaking because there are people who don't survive, quite a number. And it's important that their stories are heard and those memories are carried on, so change can happen.
And it is important to remember, I think, the people who have passed on before us, so that we know the severity of the consequences if you stay in an abusive relationship, or when you try to leave, how dangerous it is. And I think it is very important to raise awareness about that in churches, because I do feel like many, many times church staff doesn't support victims leaving because they're very intimidated about advising for divorce, which we're not promoting divorce. I think we've been falsely accused of that, but we are promoting people's safety, and if that means leaving a marriage that's not reconcilable, I think that's very important to point out, because I would rather, I've actually told a minister this before, I would rather someone leave an abusive marriage and end up somewhere safe than for her to go back and end up in a body bag.
Right.
And
it happens.
Yeah, and I think that's something that many people try to ignore, and we try to raise awareness to shine a light on that reality, because we escaped similar situations that, even in my situation, I felt like it could have been deadly if I stayed. Because there was certain points where I just felt like my dad, one day, he's going to snap and kill us, because he was constantly getting angry all the time. And he was it was getting progressively worse throughout the months that we were staying there. And so I will always be grateful that I had an opportunity to get out and stay out. So.
The resources in this town, Shreveport, Bossier, Webster, Minden area, Manny, these are all areas that PCI they represent. There's shelters that women can go to when it's in that crisis mode of getting out. You'll learn statistics later on today about escaping and how much your risk of goes up of being killed trying to leave this relationship, but with safety planning and the right tools and the help. When the moment's right, you'll know as a survivor that it's time to go because your days are numbered. People ask, why don't they change or can they change? And we'll talk to a couple of people today that they represent organizations where abusers are rehabilitated. But not all of them choose that route. It's very hard and it takes a lot of commitment from the abuser. And I think it's important that if you're in that situation, if you can leave, let them get the help they need, and then see later, if later meaning probably a year or more, that it's stable enough that you could try again. Personally, in my case, that's not an option. Mine was very near becoming lethal to me, and I don't see that I could rebuild that trust or the love that would require again. But in all of that, it was a blessing. God brought me out of it and planted me right back in Shreveport where I should have been to begin with, and got me in the right church with the right people. And this is a calling that was put on my life through my escape. And I wanted to add something I had meant to say a while ago when you were talking to Lai, that we do have survivors speaking today, and when we do encourage you to sign in and communicate with us, ask questions. But if you do, please be respectful that this is a survivor, and choose words carefully that don't hurt. And we'll ask them your questions. If we don't ask them exactly the same words, maybe it's because we know there's a trigger in there. So please ask questions, but let's keep them on the nice side.
Yes. We definitely want our survivors that are our guests to feel comfortable coming again to our live stream. So, but we welcome any questions, concerns y'all might have. We really want to interact with the community, so all is welcome.
Yep.
Yes, so I hope you stay on until 5:30. If not, we realize this is a very long live stream, and it should be recorded later on our YouTube channel. So,
or pop in and out if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't make the whole stretch, check in every now and then and see who's up and what's out there to learn. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. So we have 3 minutes left, and I think we went over all of our talking points. So our next guest is going to be Miss Valencia Edwards of Samaritan Counseling Center, and we look forward to talking with her about her ministry and her counseling services and how does she talk to her clients, within reason. Like, she can't talk about specific cases, obviously, because she's bound by confidentiality. But, and then afterwards, we are going to be able to speak to different organizations, and we really look forward to it. Welcome back to the live stream. Sorry that you kind of missed the first minute of our voice. Apparently it cut out. What I was saying is we are Dream Ministries. Our Dream stands for Domestic Relationship Education on Abuse Ministries, and we raise awareness against domestic violence and especially spiritual abuse in Christian churches and ministries. And that's pretty much around the stuff that I was trying to say. I don't know how much cut out. But today we have our lovely guest. Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Valencia Jones Edwards, and I am a PLPC for Samaritan Counseling Center, which is a faith-based counseling center.
So, what do you do when it comes to faith-based? Why is that important for you?
Well, because I don't look at counseling as a job or something to do. I have always looked at it as this is my calling from God. And when I chose to do domestic violence as a specialty, it wasn't because it was just, I just chose a specialty because I felt like, oh, it's kind of neat. I actually have a passion for it. I'm actually a survivor of domestic violence myself. And then also being an advocate, and then with my counseling, it just made sense to specialize in that area.
I think what you do is awesome. And a little short story. The reason why I wanted to interview you was because when I first started dealing with my PTSD symptoms and I was looking for a counselor, I called every Christian organization in town that specializes in counseling, and they all rejected me because they don't take domestic violence survivors. And so when it was almost a year after I finished my PTSD therapy, that I came across Samaritan Counseling Center as y'all were first opening, and I was actually very excited that there is a Christian counseling center I can send people to, because I didn't have that option when I was looking.
Yes.
I looked everywhere. I was on the phone for 3 hours looking
goodness.
for a counseling center, and no one would take me. So I'm very thankful that y'all opened.
Thank you.
No problem. So, what services do you provide, and how do you talk? Do you talk to victims? Do you talk to abusers?
Okay. So I actually specialize in the victims because I am a survivor of domestic violence. But along the way, when you get to doing it for so long, after a while, you see a repetitive victim. I guess, and I'm not saying that it's the same people, but I started noticing that the perpetrators would send more victims. And it would be, let's make up a name, Josh. And then 6 months later or a year, Josh would have another ex. And I started noticing a cycle. I'm like, okay, I'm helping these women. They're recovering and they're going on with their lives. But Josh is out there making more victims. And he's out there leaving these string of problems and issues that people have to deal with. So why don't I just go straight to Josh and try to work with him? So I switched my focus and started to incorporate the people who actually abuse, male or female, didn't matter. And I found that by helping whatever the issue, because it's usually something that caused that. I have a saying that hurt people. And that's not often the case, but a lot of the times what I found in my personal counseling is that is the case. And so when I start to help the actual perpetrators of the abuse, you tend to break that cycle of them out there creating more and more victims. And so I actually like that. And then the last one, I help human trafficking survivors, because human trafficking, a lot of domestic violence goes along with that. Because a lot of times the trafficker or pimp is actually an intimate partner or the significant other of the person who's in the life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, do you know of signs of whether or not a person who is an abuser is actually recovering versus is there no turning back where he's just dead set on his ways and he will not change?
Yes, absolutely. Generally, if he has an aversion to me, and after the program, which is 6 months long, because they go through a batterers intervention program, which is BIP, and it's court ordered. And usually, somewhere within a month or two, they try to warm up to me because they're starting to let their guard down. Of course, when they first come, very hostile. But generally, if he remains a chauvinist, if he remains disrespectful to me, because of course when they walk in and see that I'm a woman, that causes red flags because they're like, wait a minute, I have to get counseling or get help from a woman. Are you serious? So they really have a speech about that you're a woman and you think you're going to tell me as a male what to do. And so generally, if they keep that attitude, then there's really nothing I can do. And I can say from my personal experience, I can't speak for everyone, traffickers or pimps, they are the hardest because they don't see it as I'm hurting someone, and there's generally no cycle to break. It's money. I actually had one trafficker who said, I don't see them as women or little girls, I see them as money. And so if I see a 12-year-old walking home from school, I'm going to, whisper in her ear and try to get her to come with me. And if she comes with me, then I'm going to have her make me money in another state. And I don't see it as someone's daughter. I don't see that as a school kid or whatever. I just see money. All I see is dollar signs.
And I think that's an important point that you brought up, that another thing that we raise awareness about a lot is that many traffickers or even abusers, they don't see their victims as people. They view them as objects to be owned, as possessions to be overpowered about. And I think that's a very good point that you did bring up. So,
absolutely.
What advice would you give to somebody who is hesitant to reaching out to you?
Will they be a perpetrator, or do you want for the victim's perspective?
I think for both. You can take it one at a time.
For the victim, I would say if you're hesitant, what do you have to lose? I mean, absolutely nothing could come of staying where you are. So why not try something different? It doesn't mean that everything is going to end or everything is going to change right away. But let's take baby steps together. It's not something you have to overcome. Because a lot of times when victims who are hesitant, when they come to me, they think I'm going to tell them, leave your husband or leave your significant other, or if it's a male, leave your wife immediately. This is something that you have to do today. And they're really, really anxious about that because your whole world is about to blow up in 3 seconds. And I tell them, absolutely not. We take baby steps and we heal what's on the inside first. That's what counseling does. And so once we do that, and because I'm faith-based, we have a series of prayer, and I will give you scriptures to lean on, journaling, all this type of stuff. Once we get through that part and build you up, you make the decision. I never tell you to do anything you don't want to do. So if you come to me for help, I promise you, there's nobody that's going to force you to do anything. It's just going to be a process, and then in the end, you will tell me what you want to do, and I would just help you achieve that, even if it turns into let's get him or her, the perpetrator, some help, because it may not be an option for, okay, I want to leave him or her, and then that's it, I'm done, I'm just going to break up the family, because sometimes some people can get help. If it's the abuser who is hesitant, I would say, how happy can you be when you're abusing other people that you love? And if you came from abuse, here's a story, quick story. I had a guy in my class. He's 30-some years old, just got out of prison.
Yeah.
He's sitting there rocking back and forth, telling the story about how his mama almost died, and she had a head wound, and dad had beat her so bad he had never seen that much blood. He said, I ran to the closet. I wrapped myself in a blanket, and I was just rocking because I was like, my mom is dead, my mom is dead. And as he's telling this story, he's sitting there in my presence in his 30s, rocking as if he's this 6-year-old. And he said, my dad was a monster, and I can't believe he did that to her. And so after I paused for a minute, I said, so then why, too, are you the monster in your home? And he had never thought about it that way. I said, it's a cycle. You are now the monster of your children's nightmares. Because he said, I still have nightmares about my dad. I said, but now you're giving your children nightmares. Yeah. And he just broke in tears. He said, I never thought about it like that. So if you are anyone who feels like, okay, I saw this growing up, or everybody in my family, this is normal, how good do you feel about that? Because if you feel any pause at all that maybe this is something that I never want to grow up and be like my uncle or like my dad. I saw this in my neighborhood, in my community. I never want to be that, but yet here I am. Well, then what do you have to lose? Come get help, and we would take baby steps to break that cycle because, like I said, oftentimes hurt people. And if you have an inner pain that you're projecting onto someone else, then let me help you with the inner pain.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I would also wanted to ask you, what advice would you give a civilian who encounters a victim and maybe doesn't know what to do?
If you encounter a victim, the first thing I would say is, because this is just normal, most people start asking questions in a negative connotation, as if, why are you still there? Why don't you leave? What is wrong with you? Where did you get that bruise? And when that person lies about it, you start being negative. The worst thing you can do is attack them and make them feel bad about their choices. I would say be compassionate. Take note of everything that's going on and all the bruises that you're seeing, so that when you speak to them about that, you're coming at them from a place of nurturing, caring, compassion, and love. You're not coming at them making them feel stupid because they're in a relationship that you may not have chosen to be in. But there's an old saying that says, there but by the grace of God go I. So remember that just because they're in a situation, you too could find yourself in a situation that you had no idea, never in a million years would you want to be in. So how would you, and another question is, how would you want to be treated if you were in a situation like that? Would you want to be approached in a way where you're being called names? Why did you stay that long? How could you? I've had so many people tell me that when they don't know what I do for a living, those women are stupid. How could they do that? The first time somebody hit you, you should have left. Why would you put up with that? And I just kind of shake my head like, that's not how that works. You don't go on the first date and then she or he says, order what I say order, and if you don't, they slap you in front of everybody in the restaurant because they know that I don't know you, so I can't just do this right now. It's a process.
Of course, if it's the first date, anybody would walk out of there and leave.
Anyone. But this is after you've fallen in love. There are generally, well, I don't know what you would call them, but some people call them milestones.
Yes.
When you hit a milestone, that's usually when they clutching you, and then that's when the abuse starts. It's usually when you move in with them. Once they see that you love them, you have a child or get married.
Yes.
And that's for male or female, because even if she's the abuser and she gives you a child, and then she's like, okay, I got him now because now we have children together. So once those major life moments happen, then that's the time that the abuse usually escalates. And then another thing you have to remember is that the abuse is not constant. It's not like this is 24/7 my life. It's like a horror movie. No, they're usually nice and very charming and very loving all the other times. But if you know the cycle of abuse, it ends with the honeymoon phase, which is the beautiful roses at your job and, all these beautiful things. But then the tension building starts again.
Yeah.
And then the actual incident, all of these things happen. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people, what they don't see is, like, when you're being in that situation, you remember the honeymoon phase. Like,
Yes.
you talk to yourself, like, he's not always like this.
Absolutely not.
So, you don't think about, oh, he's doing this all the time. You think of, oh, well, he bought me flowers. He encouraged me the other day. He's not always like this, so you forgive. And it's almost like the abuser plays on your empathy and plays on your forgiveness, and that's what needs to be called out.
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. Like I said, that's why they wait till you fall in love, and that's why they wait till you have children when you get married. Like I said, you said it perfectly. Of course, if it's the first date, everyone would leave. Very few people would sit there on the first date, but have sympathy to know that this is not something, this is a process.
Yes.
This is literally a brainwashing process that happens over time.
Yes, and can you talk more about the brainwashing process? How do you explain that to people who may not have been in an abusive relationship and they can't wrap their mind around it?
Okay, let's say you have this sexy dress that you like to wear. It's sensual, but not too revealing. But you feel super beautiful and super, womanly in this dress. And when you start dating, he's like, oh, I love that dress. You look so good in it, Then as a couple of weeks go on, he's like, I really don't want you wearing that dress because I want that just for me. I really don't want any other people paying attention to you. And you're like, oh, that's so sweet. And then next time you try to wear the dress, he's like, you know what, I'm going to take you shopping. I'm going to buy you a better dress. And it's more, covered up and it's a little more, whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, that's sweet. He's taking me shopping. How nice. But then way into it, let's say 6 months to a year, and after he's seen that you've fallen in love with him, or you hit one of those milestones. Then when you try to pull out that same dress, how many times I've told you don't wear this dress, and then that's when you get slapped or hit, or the negative.
Yes.
Even if it starts with verbal, the verbal beats you down, and then that starts the brainwashing. Like, okay, maybe if even let's take the abuse out of the physical part, then the name calling, the emotional abuse. You're such a slut. Look what you're doing. So you like men staring at you, and then you think to yourself, well, do I want other men attention? Well, yeah, he's right, because I don't want anybody else looking at me when I have this gorgeous guy right here who loves me to death. Why am I being this way? So then you start putting it off on yourself, as if maybe it's me. I'm just being unreasonable. And then you talk to your friends and your family. It's like, why don't you ever wear that dress that you used to love and used to light up? Well, he doesn't want me to do. I'm gonna wear the dress. So then she wears the dress. She's like, oh yeah, I'm going with my friends. We're just gonna have a nice girl night out. I want to feel like a woman. Yeah, I wear the dress. But then that time, that's when he first slaps you.
Yeah, it's a slow
Very
escalation
slow.
process, and a lot of people that I talk to, like, it's so slow that by the time they're deeply in it, they often tell me, I don't know how I got this way.
Absolutely.
Because you don't see it coming as it slowly progresses. And I think that's what a lot of people don't see. Now, there are cases where it progresses immediately and it's really fast. But for the majority of people that even I've talked to, it's such a slow progression that they don't see it coming.
And for me, I didn't. When my personal story, I absolutely did not see it coming. My sister actually called it out, and she said, "You look nothing like the sister I knew." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "I mean, you look like, I don't know, I don't recognize you anymore." She was like, "You don't wear makeup. Your hair is always in a bun. You wear everything, to your ankles and to your wrists is really baggy." She was like, "What is going on?" She said, "There's nothing wrong with that style, but it's just never been you. You're so vibrant and like color, and you like."
Yeah.
She was like, what is happening to you? Why are you different?" I was like, "Oh, he just wants to, me to dress more, modest and this." She said, "But there's modest, but you can still wear the bright colors that you like and all that." And I didn't even realize it. And so after she said that, I looked in the mirror and I was like, "God, I do not look like me. How did this happen?" It just snuck up on me all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm glad your sister did bring that up to you so that you could start breaking that cycle. So I wanted to ask what other, just to keep it on your organization,
Sure.
what other services do you provide? How can people get in contact with you? Are there grants if they can't afford counseling?
Absolutely.
So just, we're here to promote your organization, so.
Okay, so we have a Tuesday group for women, and it's every Tuesday at Samaritan Counseling Center. It's from 5:30 to 6:30, and it's absolutely free. It doesn't cost anything. Just come. Even if you don't want to speak, some people come and they never want to speak. They just want to kind of observe. And when they hear everybody's story, they realize, oh, I'm not the only one. So it's just a place where you can kind of slowly come out of your shell. Sometimes when you come, you may be the only one, and then you get one-on-one help. We also offer grants, so if you can't afford counseling at all, you broke away, you're in a shelter, or you're staying with a loved one, we give you 5 free sessions. It's absolutely free. And then even after the 5 free sessions, if you have not come into a place of healing, then we grant more. So it's just totally up to you. We don't. This is not about. Samaritan is not about making money. Which is why I wanted to work there, because it's actually a nonprofit. It's a faith-based. It incorporated 2 things. I love nonprofits because they just want to help the community and build back into the community, and it's faith-based. And so I was sold because of that. And I'm actually
awesome.
proud to be able to do what I do, because other places, if it doesn't meet the quota and you don't have insurance, you can't do anything about that. You work for them, so you absolutely can't. I feel blessed that I work for an organization that I can.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for providing that, because I think that's very important that people know there are grants out there, that just because you can't afford counseling doesn't mean there's organizations that won't help you in your financial situation. So I was wondering, Vicki, do we have any questions from the audience for Ms. Valencia? Vicki's in the background, by the way. Sorry for the awkward pause.
I don't have any questions, but I have lots of thank yous and people directing a direct thank you to you, Valencia, for sharing and raising your voice to this.
Okay, I'm going to say what Vicky just said, just in case nobody heard. So apparently there's not a whole lot of questions, but there's a lot of thank yous from the community to Miss Valencia for what you do for the community, for all the services that you provide. So is there anything else that you can see? Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for
You're
coming,
welcome.
and we will take a break in a little bit, and Miss Valencia is going to attend in our next session, in our next half-hour session, and because we did have a cancellation, but we are going to talk about spiritual abuse in the next segment. So please do send in your questions so that we can keep the stream rolling, and thank you for everybody who is watching in our audience. Oh wait, we do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 1 second, everybody. One second, y'all. The question is coming in.
Can anyone show up for group, or do they have to be referred?
No,
Can-
anyone can show up for group. Sorry,
So
the question. Go
The
ahead.
question is, can anybody show up to group, or do they have to be referred?
No, it's open and it's anonymous. So if you want to come, just show up on Tuesday at 5:30, 6:30. And it's only for women, though. This group, even though I counsel both sides, it's only for women. But if you are a male being abused, absolutely, you can come. Just call 318-221-6121 and tell them you want the pro bono sessions, and you want either you're the abuser or you're the victim, or if you're a woman, you don't want to do a group setting, that's fine. Call the number, make an appointment, tell them you want the pro bono sessions, and we definitely will get that set up for you.
So thank you, everybody, for submitting your questions and for tagging along on the live stream. And we will be back after our, we're going to have like a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back. Thank you for staying with the live stream if you are still on. Right now, I still have Miss Valencia with us, and she is crashing my party, like she just said. So that was her words, not mine. But we did have Miss Jerry Bowen cancel because we had to switch locations, and she couldn't make it to this current location. But a big shout out to Jerry Bowen from FJC. We love you.
Love you, Jerry.
And FJC is the Family Justice Center where all victims of different crimes can go to get resources for help. So if you need specific help for your specific crime that has been committed against you, you can always go to the Family Justice Center, and their office is located in Bossier City. So we still want to promote them, even though a representative couldn't come from there, and we still love you, Jerry. So our current topic is, what is spiritual abuse? And I'm not a reporter, so I'm gonna keep on reading from my notes. So I wrote down here, spiritual abuse is often called religious abuse. And religious abuse occurs when any form of religion, religious doctrinal book, or religious institution is used to keep victims of domestic violence held captive in their abusive situation. Religious abuse occurs in all religions. It doesn't make that one religion violent or different from the others. And this form of abuse, religious abuse, is common among Christians, Christian organizations, as much as it is other religions. And that's what I want to raise awareness of. I do not believe the Bible promotes abuse in any form. However, like other sources, abusers use the Bible, or they manipulate it in order to keep their victims captive. There are more than these signs that I'm going to state, but I have together 3 condensed signs of religious abuse that abusers conduct. Abusers want to hold their victims accountable. This is sign number 1. Abusers want to hold their victims accountable to the victim's side of the marriage, but they don't want to be held accountable to their own effort into the marriage. And an example of this is how they can twist Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, there's a verse in verse 22 where it says, "Wives, submit unto your husbands as you do unto the Lord." But right after that verse, at verse 25, it says, Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy and cleansing, and by washing her with the water of the word. So oftentimes abusers want to hold the victim accountable to, you must submit to me, you must honor me, but they don't want to be held accountable to actually loving their wife, their own side. Now, number 2 is abusers often sin but don't want to be held accountable to their sin, but they want to hold their victim accountable to whatever sin they may or may not commit. And oftentimes, abusers want to hold the victim accountable to where they either deflect their own sin on the victim, or they make up sin that the victim may not be committing. So I'm going to give different examples of this. An example of this is if an abuser is caught lying, he may deflect this onto his victim, or he may get defensive, he may brush it off. But if the victim tries to hold him further accountable, he may accuse the victim of not being forgiving enough, or being angry, sinful, vengeful. I've heard it all. Like, I've heard you're being unsubmissive, you're being unfaithful to me. But by dodging accountability and accusing the victim of sin of unforgiveness, he is creating sin that the victim may or may not be committing. And when he is accusing the victim of being angry or vengeful, he is deflecting his own sin onto her. The last sign that I see religious abuse occur is when abusers change the definition of terms or intentionally misrepresent Bible passages. Example of changing terms would be equating the term forgiveness to reconciliation, equating the term love to never seeking legal justice against him, and they will equate equate biblical submission with passivity or blind submission to their wrongdoings. Abusers will often make accountability to equate anger. So if like, let's say I'm abusing you and you're trying to hold me accountable, I'll just say you're angry and try to shut you up. And they will try to make that term accountability the same thing to mean angry or bitter or vengeful, when being held accountable is actually a good thing. Even though I don't see myself as abusive, I need to be held accountable for my actions. It always goes both ways. And now, when it comes to misinterpreting verses, I'll go back to Ephesians 5, where it does say, wives, submit to your husbands. He will make that verse out to mean, he'll take it out of context and make it out to mean, you must submit unto me, even unto my beatings, verbal abuse, and death threats, when that is not the context of that verse at all. They will completely omit the section right afterwards that says husband must love their wives and sacrifice himself for her. And that same word, husbands love your wives, that word love is the same word love used in 1 Corinthians 13 and is defined in that chapter. In 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love is patient, kind, not envious. It does not boast, it's not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong, it does not delight in evil, and it rejoices in truth. It always protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres. So when the Ephesians says, husbands, love your wives, it is this patient kind of love that's not easily angered, and it doesn't look for reasons to abuse you. And that's the kind of husband that the Bible tells wives to submit to. It's not blind submission to an angry abuser. It is submission to a loving husband who will lay his life down to save her life. And so basically, abusers use every term, verse, for their main goal, which is power and control over the victim, and the Bible doesn't warrant this. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on what religious abuse is.
Well, I agree with everything that you said, because I've seen all of those. When I typically counsel abusers, like you said, they're like overwhelmingly Christian, and I hear that Ephesians scripture like all the time.
Yes.
It's surprising how many times they say, well, she would have just submitted. I hear it like 100 times in a session.
In fact, there's a verse that says one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I try to bring up to abusers, and oftentimes they'll be like, but she didn't submit. Well, you're supposed to have self-control, so keep your violence to yourself, you know.
Absolutely, and I did exactly what you just did. The scripture doesn't end there. It continues. It doesn't say, wives, submit to your husbands, and then stop. It goes on to say, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. And like you said, was willing to give up his life for it. And so if you have that kind of self-sacrificing love to where you're willing to lay down your life for this person, then how is it that if you're the one damaging her and abusing her and oftentimes, causing her to lose her life?
Yes.
So how is half of the scripture right, but the other half is being omitted? And so I try to keep bringing that back. Like, okay, you can't have half of the scripture. You can't take pieces of the Bible and cherry pick what's neat and what serves your purposes. You have to take the whole Bible, because the whole Bible, all of it together, makes the perfect word.
In fact, there's another verse where God actually is every time I see God talking to someone who is trying to get a divorce, he's going to the husband and rebuking the husband for not making the marriage work. There are very, very rarely any verses that I see where God approaches the woman and be like, why haven't you submitted enough? I often see him rebuking the husband, like, why haven't you loved your wife enough? And I don't have that verse with me, but I believe it's in Malachi where God is actually rebuking a husband for wanting to leave his wife. The passage is not clear whether the husband actually committed adultery or not, or he was intending to commit adultery. And God goes to the husband and says, when you divorce your wife, you are committing violence against the one you are to protect. That is actually in the Bible, and he was just trying to leave her, and he's equating him leaving her with violence against her because he doesn't view violence as okay. And I like pulling up verse. I think the Bible, I could go on a whole rant on this, but I think the Bible is a very self-reflecting book.
Absolutely.
If you are reading the Bible and you see yourself as one of the disciples but not as the Pharisee, I think you may be reading it wrong. Because every time I would read the Bible, I would self-reflect and actually find myself in the Pharisee's shoes. If I was reading the book of Proverbs and it was warning against anger issues, I would see myself as the angry person, not the author of Proverbs rebuking someone angry. So I think that most victims will read the Bible as a self-reflecting book so we can see our flaws and try to grow in Christ and learn from our flaws and grow out of them. But abusers will read the Bible as if, what can they use against somebody else? And that's not an appropriate way. That's not proper hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is a term of how to interpret the Bible, and we learn this in our theology courses. And just the Bible is very important to self-reflect and grow. It definitely is abused when you are trying to twist Scripture for your own benefit. And I think all of us are guilty of that, but abusers do take that to an extent that's not biblical. So what are some of the signs that you think exist of spiritual abuse?
Well, one of them is that I see a lot of people, usually I see a lot of people being forced to attend a religious ceremony. Like you said, we're talking more about Christianity.
Yes.
So you can kind of see it, and I've seen it in person. You know, you can kind of see it in the woman's face or the children's faces where they're being forced to be there. You can feel their energy that this is not an enjoyable experience. Forced Bible study and forced remembering Scripture. There's nothing wrong with remembering Scripture because we should carry the Bibles in our hearts. But when you're being forced, it's more like a chore.
Yes.
Than they actually want to do this. This is something that I just love. They're being forced or led. Another one is a lot of times, like I said, because I went through this, the way you dress, you know, you have this kind of like coat-like
Yes.
dress where you're kind of super modest, and there's nothing wrong with being modest, absolutely not. But your personality is like, I can't see you in that. It has nothing to do with a fashion statement. It's like our youth been lost because you're being dressed to be intentionally lost in that. And so, and another one is when you, and there's nothing wrong with this one either. All of this should be taken into context, what I'm saying, because there's nothing wrong with dressing or going to church or memorizing Scripture, but when it's being used in a way to control someone, that's when it becomes spiritual abuse. So I would say that whenever I see someone who refers to their husband when I ask them something all the time, like I said, none of these are wrong in and of itself. But if I ask you, oh, you know, anything, well, you know, I should ask my husband that. And it's like, okay, so you don't have a voice at all. Or if I
Yes.
ask you anything, well, my husband was telling me that that's what that scripture meant. But like you said, the Bible is something that we should reflect
Yes.
on. Each one of us has our own relationship with Christ.
Yes, I think 2 points that you brought up that I want to expand upon.
Okay.
A good example of what is a healthy marriage, biblical marriage, versus unhealthy. For example, me and Brandon will talk about everything. Just as much as I say I have to ask my husband, he always says I have to ask my wife, and it's a mutual thing. Right before, let me find that verse actually. Right before it says, "Wives, submit to your husbands." This is verse 22 in Ephesians 5. There's a verse in 21. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Absolutely.
So the first verse is actually that both spouses submit unto one another in
Absolutely.
decision making. So, and an example of this is like me and my husband, he will ask me, hey, can we buy this? Or like if we're making a financial decision, and I'll ask him back. That is mutual. Now, my sister was in a situation where me and her wanted to go get Starbucks coffee, and Starbucks was right down the street from us. And she got really scared, and she didn't want to go, and because she didn't even want to ask her husband because she was so scared of how he would reciprocate or overreact about her going to drink coffee. Because in his mind, and she told me this later, that he was constantly accusing her of cheating, that she wasn't wanting to go to Starbucks to go out with her sister to have a cup of coffee away from the kids for 5 minutes. It was, she must be wanting to cheat. And he was constantly accusing her of that. So there's a difference between, like, you can't even go to the grocery store around the corner from your house, or you can't go to Starbucks across the street, versus, you know, you and your husband making mutual decisions together. You know, there's a difference between those two. There was another point that you had said, and I forgot about it. But, the next point I wanted to make was how abusers twist things. Like, it's okay to be modest. It's okay to go to church. It's okay to go to church service, pray, memorize scripture. It becomes a problem when they're almost like the Pharisees of the Bible, drilling it in you in a legalistic manner, and they're guilt tripping you out of it. And that's not something that's coming from your heart. Faith is a choice. You know, for John 3:16 says that Jesus came so that whosoever believes in him would have eternal life. And this is not, he didn't come to condemn the world, he came to save. So faith is a personal choice that we all have to make. And if it's Bible study, it's supposed to be for our personal growth with Christ as well as corporate growth in the church. It shouldn't be something that's almost bashed over you, if that makes sense. So there's a difference there. I think you made really good points in that. I do see that we have questions coming in. So, let's see. Do you think that the use of the Bible, sorry, the camera's in the way, to keep a victim in church, do so just to make them look good to other church members? So I'm assuming the question is, what do you do when somebody forces you to go to church to make you look good among other church members?
Right. Do you, am I mic? I think I am. When you have a victim that is forced to go to church, and it's, say her husband's Catholic and she was Baptist, and it's not the faith it's not the religious doctrine she would pick, you know,
Okay.
it's still Christian, but it's not her background. And he's prominent in the church, say an elder, or, you know, and you walk in and everybody's smiling and it's a great day. But, you know, do you think that elder or that gentleman or woman in that church is doing that to gain support from other members?
Okay.
That kind of makes the victim afraid to reach out to others in the church.
Okay. So was the mic open? Do you know? Okay, the mic was open. All right. So everyone could hear Vicky's question. I think that really depends on the situation, whether the victim or the person feels like it's just a show and that she's being pressured to go for him to get attention. It also depends on whether or not there's just that strife there simply because there's different religious convictions with the two members of the household. I actually saw a statistic about divorce cases that one of the main reasons why couples get divorced is how to discipline the kids, finances, and religion. Like, what religion do you follow? And So it really depends on the person. But I can say, as somebody who was a pastor's daughter, who was abused, this was my story. Definitely how you looked in church was very important. Like, you better not step out of line or he will go home and beat you. So for us, religion was used as a way to abuse, and it was his public reputation that was very important. Or else, like, you better not make him look bad in front of the church. So, so there, you have to take it by case. I guess my question would be, is he so concerned with how he looks in the church that he goes back and threatens you about how he looks in the church? Is it a constant argument when you get home, like, you made me look bad, how dare you? Do you feel like your life is threatened if you don't keep up that good face? Does he yell and scream at you all the way to church, and then suddenly when you get to the parking lot and you open the door, it's, hi, how are you? And he's completely calm. Because abusers can switch on and off that anger. They can go from barking angry to when the police knock on the door, they're calm as can be. And that's one of the signs that they have self-control. They're just deliberately not showing control in front of the victim so that they can have control over her. So how would you answer that question?
Like you said, I tend to trust my gut on certain things. So you feel like this is for show, I would go with your gut, because you know if you feel like you're being used. Because a lot of times, I do know a lot of people in the church, and I had a friend who said, I have to get married or else I can't escalate to a higher level in the church because I can't be single and do that. So I really need someone who's going to look the part and all these things. These are conversations I've actually had with people. And single women who felt like I have to hurry up and get married and have someone who looks the part and everything because a single woman in church is not accepted.
Yeah.
So if you want to change the dynamic of that and people being used in that way, then you have to change the stereotype of who can be accepted. Christ said everyone is welcome. But for some reason in church, we have a certain stereotype within religion that you have to follow. You have to look a certain way. You have to talk a certain way. You have to dress a certain way. And in order to keep up appearances, you have to accept a lot of things you normally would not accept. So if you feel like these are things I have to do because my husband is the pastor, then I have to forgive his indiscretions because it's going to make us and his reputation and his church look bad. Well, then you know that. So if your gut is telling you this doesn't feel good, I don't think I should be doing this, I think I'm being used in some way, male or female, it doesn't matter, then you know this is a time for me to walk away because he doesn't want me, he just wants wife. As long as it's wife, I can remain deacon. As long as it's wife and she looks good, she played a part, I may become associate pastor. And so, like I say, it's a much deeper issue here.
Yeah, and I think one last thing I want to say before our minute runs out is that pastors are flawed people too. That, I think church should be a place where we do admit our flaws and that nobody is perfect. I think there is also a social pressure on pastors to look the part, to play the part, to be this perfect individual, and I think that needs to change in the churches.
Absolutely.
Because then if they need, let's say the pastor and the pastor's wife needs marriage counseling or they need help, how are they going to ask for help if they're put on this pedestal and they're expected to be perfect 24/7? So that's just my input on this, and we can't wait to see you in the next segment. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
continuing to join our live stream. And right now, we have Miss LT here. Can you state your full name, your nickname, and what organizations you are a part of? And so you have the floor.
All right. Well, hello everybody. My name is Latienda Pierre Davis, but everybody knows me as LT. I am the president of the Caddo Bossier Domestic Violence Task Force. I'm also an investigator with the Caddo District Attorney's Office, and I work in the Special Victims Unit where I am responsible for screening and doing follow-up investigations for both domestic violence incidents as well as sexual assault. So I'm happy to be here.
That is awesome. So I wanted to ask, with the task force, what is your vision for it? What are your goals? Where do you want to see it go in the next while, as long as you're president? So,
Okay. With a little bit of background about the Caddo Bossier
yes.
task force that would help people to understand where we are actually going to be going. The task force has been around since 2001, and so we are on the verge of celebrating our 20th year of operating in the Caddo Bossier area. Now, the task force mission, in a nutshell, to just kind of sum it up, is basically to be able to provide programs and services through our different members that are part of the task force that are charitable, and that they also help in the prevention of domestic violence as well as child abuse. And so as we move towards our 20th year, and me being is the new president of the task force, our mission will be to return to our roots of what the task force began in 2001, but also build upon that return and introduce some new and inventive ways of reaching out to our community and being able to educate our community about how important it is to build healthy relationships and also to prevent domestic violence and child abuse wherever it is seen. So that includes having our members. One of the things that we're going to be doing is our members, as they join, they're going to be broken down into various committees, and these committees are going to be designed to target different areas that we deal with when we're talking about how do you combat domestic violence. And so that is the vision that I am foreseeing as president, leading this extraordinary group of young women and men. So I'm looking forward to just being that person who helps to steer us moving forward.
And we are very proud to have you as our leader.
Thank you.
So we are very excited about your vision and your leadership skills. I'm always amazed at how you talk. You're so calm and collected and analytical. I just love listening to you speak because I've listened to you be on several different podcasts as well. Mm-hmm. I think I just love how you lead. You know, I just can't emphasize that enough. Definitely. I think you are a very one of the perfect candidates to be president, honestly. Like, I can't say enough good things about you, to be honest. And so I wanted to one of our goals is to promote resources. So what does the DA's office do to help victims? And like, let's say that you get a domestic violence call. What do you do?
Okay. So the process, first to answer the question of what does the DA's office do to help victims, I want to start off by bragging on our victim assistance coordinators, because that is a resource that is phenomenal. The ladies that make up our victim assistance coordinators, they are the ones who are on the front lines with our victims, that as these cases go through the process of being prosecuted, they're there to help the victim in any way that is needed, to get access to the different resources that is needed. And so our victim assistance coordinators, they are actually that special weapon that we have when we talk about how do we combat dealing with domestic violence. Now, as far as the process of how we deal with domestic violence cases, when I receive a report of a domestic violence incident, my first initiative in building the follow-up investigation package is to reach back out to the victim. That's important to get back in touch. A lot has changed. We now have what is called the Gwen's Laws, named after
Yes.
Gwen Sally, who tragically lost her life due to domestic violence. But the Gwen's Laws guides how we handle prosecution of these different cases that fall up under the realm of domestic violence. And so one of the most important elements of the Gwen's Laws is reaching back out to the victims, getting in touch with the
Yes.
victims 48 hour, trying to establish some type of contact to see what is their safety level, what is going on. That is at the center of my investigation. Now,
Yes.
other elements that are involved in my investigation is making sure that as we try to analyze the safety of the victim, also start to build the information and the evidence that is needed to actually put the case through the judicial system. One of the things that oftentimes does happen is that, unfortunately, with the cycle of abuse,
Yes.
we cannot 100% throw it all on just the victim because a lot of times our victims might not be in a position where they're able to finally say, I want justice for me. And so we have to also make sure we support any case that comes through with the evidence that's out there to prove that this happened, because the state does pick up the charges to analyze and make sure everything is in order.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. So does that mean, like, if the victim chooses not to press charges, that the state will take over?
Yes,
Okay.
the state does take over. And what I oftentimes have to talk to a victim about, especially when they say they want to drop charges, is I try to make sure that they understand why we have a no drop policy when it comes to these type of situations.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, Louisiana right now ranks number 5 in the nation when it comes to homicides that have been the result of a domestic violence background. Dropping the charges based solely off the victim's request can be a safety hazard for that victim, because
Yes.
at the time the motives might be something else other than, okay, I feel fine, I'm okay. There are times where victims might request to drop charges because they are carrying the child of the abuser. And
Yeah.
so they're more trying to put the family nucleus back together than about their own safety. And we see this often. And so I explained to the victims on the phone that we will document this information, but it's important for us to do these safety checks, to put in place some information, try to investigate, try to see what all is going on before any determination is made or such. So our prosecutors are trying to make sure that they are truly doing a safety check of the victim before any talks of dropping charges or reducing charges or anything is done.
I'm glad that you brought all that up, because all that information up, and you put it in such good words that I don't think I could repeat it and relay it as well as I would like to. But I think that is very, very important information for victims to know about the legal side. I often deal with the spiritual side of things, or just talking one-on-one with victims, almost like a friend or a support group leader.
Right.
But I think it is very important that they hear it from the legal standpoint in order to press charges, or go through with legalities of the things that I don't fully understand. So you are really good at explaining all of it. So if a victim, I guess I want to put it this way. How do you approach a victim who may not feel comfortable with somebody in uniform? Because a lot of victims, they may not necessarily have good experience with people in uniform. So how do you approach them, make them feel more comfortable? How can you get them to, how can you get them to open up to you so that you can build a case?
Okay. One of the things that is very important when talking to a victim who's been impacted by domestic violence is not talking to them in a judgmental type of way. That is so important. Whenever I am doing an interview, my main thing that I want them to know
Yeah.
is that whatever you're telling to me, you're going by what you can recall. So my line of questions are never tell me what happened. My line of question is, okay, tell me what you recall about that day that was
I
going
think
on
that's really good.
that led up.
A great way to word
Yes,
it. You
yes.
know?
Like, tell me what you remember, what you recall. That's important because then one of the things that we study and should understand about the cycle of abuse is the more and more they get outside of removed from the incident itself, the more the brain is going to go through its own process of trying to recall what it is. And so
Yes.
if I contact a victim two days later after the incident has happened and I'm telling them, just tell me what you recall, tell me what you remember,
Yeah, and what I want to add to what you're saying is the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence did train us on this. It's called trauma-informed response. They explained how in several training sessions that when a victim is going through domestic violence, oftentimes their brain just almost like it shuts down and it quits recording the event simply because it's so traumatic. The brain is trying to protect the victim. And that's why you'll see a lot of victims who don't recall what happened until much, much later. That's why I do appreciate your approach to it. It's called trauma-informed response, that it's okay if she remembers what happened later after the shock has worn off. So I do appreciate your work in that field for
sure. I appreciate you for putting out what is actually called, because there are videos on YouTube for anybody that wants a basic understanding. There are several videos on YouTube that will show you how that actually works. And I remember last year when I attended a conference that was totally about those different type of topics centered around domestic violence. That's one of the things that they encourage, is that when we are talking to other law enforcement officers and training them about how to interview, start out by having them look at a video that actually shows how a victim's brain is responding right at the moment in time, and to help prevent the frustration of, how are we to believe that he or she is credible? Because another thing that I also try to make sure that when I'm talking to the victims is that I am not putting their life on display. There is no such thing as a perfect victim. And we know that oftentimes with victims of domestic violence, their abuser chose them because of the level of imperfections that they could expose.
That they could exploit.
Exactly, exploit. And so you get a lot of times what I have to deal with, and what we talk about often, is we deal with family and friends who intervene on the behalf of the abuser, and they'll contact the DA's office, they'll contact me, and they'll say, well, let me tell you about her, or let me tell you about him. And other, ma'am, sir, I'm sorry.
They try to be character witnesses.
Exactly. That's not going to do nothing with my case. I'm sorry. If you want to go talk to his attorney and tell him all that, that's on you. But for me, in a polite way, get off the phone, please. I have to just, I word it in a professional manner, because if you understand all the different dynamics in how it's all done, that there is going to become a point. We've actually dealt with family members who will actually drive the victim up to our office to request to drop charges, and they will overtalk the victim and put them in a position of trying to say, see how shaky or how untrustworthy it is. And so when I'm talking with the victims, I'm interviewing them, I make sure they understand I'm look, what you are or what past you may have, that does not justify what has occurred. Period.
And something that victims tell me often is that this is not the Shreveport Police Department or Bossier. These are people out of state. But the police officers will come and the victim is traumatized. She can't remember what happened properly because her mind has shut down because her mind blocks everything, and she remembers things in patches and out of order, and the abuser is calm. And so the police officers have decide not to write a report, or they think she's crazy. So if you're talking to someone out of your district, who maybe someone in uniform who often believes the abuser because he can't understand why she looks so erratic and he looks super calm. How can you explain to them what are the signs of an abuser, like when the police are called or when the DA's office is called?
Well, now we have a lot of training that has come out in recent years to explain why it is in the interest of the abuser to remain calm on the scene. See, we always remember at the foundation of every domestic violence incident, it is about control.
Yeah.
And it's about who has the control too. And so when that officer arrives on the scene with that gun and that badge and that vest on, because I've been in that position of that, it is in the best interest of that abuser to humble themselves.
Yes.
Because now, who's got the control? That officer on the scene do. And so one of the things that we're oftentimes having to train to understand is don't let that calmness cause you to side with that abuser.
Yes.
Because they will humble themselves for you, because now you're in a position where you have something that if they do act the way they really are, then you actually are in a position to do something to them,
Yeah.
about it.
And what I tell people who don't understand domestic violence is that a lot of times they believe abusers have self-control. And in all reality, they have self-control. Because when they're with the victim, they can be raging,
Yes.
flipping tables,
Yes.
cussing, having death threats. The moment the police knocks on the door, boom, calm. And you don't switch from being a raging lunatic to a very calm, humble Christian in in seconds, in a matter of split seconds, by the time you go to the door and open it for the cop,
Right.
for the police officer. It doesn't happen. It shows a level of coldness
Yes.
that they have,
Yes.
And
it's all about playing the game to
Yeah.
try to be able to win and start the cycle back again. Because as soon as that officer leaves, if they're able to convince that officer to get back in that unit and not file a report, and this is why it's documentation of any domestic incident at all now is of importance, because if nothing else, the documentation allows a record to form. And so one of the things that we have done in a lot of our cases that are now allowed is we can go back and pull all the reports of all calls that have happened that have been domestic related. We can also pull what were the results when they went to court, because again, we're talking about establishing that this is a pattern.
Yes.
So yes, even though they might be arrested for domestic abuse battery, first offense, a misdemeanor, so to speak, if I pull all those reports and I start to look and I see, okay, back in 2005, you had an incident. In 2007, you had another incident. And it starts to add up. It's one of those things that the pattern is you just managed to get away with it under the surface for a while. You were able to convince that officer to get back in that car, but you didn't know that officer was typing that report anyway. So, it's one of those things that, yes, the whole calm, it's in their best interest to be calm, because they're looking to figure out how can they take back control, because they know if the officer knocks on the door, they've lost the control.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for
You're
everything
welcome.
that you do at the DA's office. And is there a Facebook page that people can follow for the DA's office or the task force?
Yes, the district attorney's office, we actually do have our own Facebook page, so you can type in, search Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office, and it will pop up, and you just like us and follow that page. And then also for the task force, we also have a page to Caddo Bossier Domestic Violence Task Force. And so there's one available that is available for the public, and then, so forth. So those are actually two Facebook pages that people can follow if they want to start engaging in the conversation. Also, we have various partners that we work with, everyone from Project Celebration down to Family Justice, the Family Justice Center, as well as Gingerbread House. These are all partners who help us also in the coalition, in the fight. And so by all means, like all those pages as well too. But as president on behalf of the Caddo Bossier Domestic Violence Task Force, I just want to say, as we come upon our 20th year, we are coming back in our community because we want this message to get out, that we want healthy relationships. I was looking at a recent report, I think we've had 5 domestic violence related deaths between the Caddo Bossier area between last year coming up to August of this year.
I'm so sorry to hear about that.
Exactly. So there's work to be done, and our task force members are up for the challenge. We got so many different, because you right there in the trenches with me. Yes. That and they're up for the challenge. And so we're coming 20th year. We finna do some things.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Does our
you.
audience have any questions for LT?
I don't see any questions, but I would like to make a comment. I think it's important that you talked about the building a paper trail, so to speak.
Yes.
In my particular case, when the officer arrived, I couldn't have told him my name. I was so traumatized, and as the next day, late afternoon, the 2 investigators came to talk to me, and you start getting better. And as the case progressed, his charges got reduced, took a plea deal, and I was so disappointed that happened, that I felt like almost that I had been failed, that I didn't fight it. I was there to put him in, and he got reduced. He served his time, and then he was able to face other charges in another city that he had abused me in, and then those got reduced after 4 years of trying to go through the system. The wheels turn slow sometimes.
Yes, it does.
But in building that and hanging on like I did, he's been arrested again, and now he's charged with twice the time.
Yep.
So don't get discouraged. To victims, don't get discouraged if you see setbacks. It feels like it's a setback, but it's really setting it up to get them where they need to be for a longer time.
Right.
And
Yes.
I appreciate your work as an investigator.
Well, thank you.
And a president of the task force.
Well, I thank y'all so much for having me. This is wonderful. I hope everybody in the audience is taking in, soaking in all this knowledge that and this information that you all are getting.
And we appreciate you being here for sure.
No
We are
problem.
very honored that you are here.
Well, thank you.
So-
Thank you.
And thank you for our audience who is still watching. Please stay tuned for our next segment.
Welcome back. I'm Vicki. If you missed me in the very first interview, I'm one of the co-founders of Dream Ministries, and thank you for tuning in. Today we have, and now we have Vicki Britton with us, she's a survivor, and she's gonna tell us a little bit about what she went through with her family and how it still affects her today. As I said earlier, these are survivors, some of these that are going to speak. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. Just be respectful and be kind. And Vicki, tell me how did you become a victim of domestic violence?
In 2008, my daughter was killed in a domestic violence relationship. And after she was killed, I didn't want to see any more young girls have to go through that, or any, mother or father lose their child in a domestic violence relationship. So I decided I was going to bring awareness and do what I needed to do to help.
In helping, do you find that's helped you heal?
Yes, it helps you heal. Telling Tavia's story, being around other people that have also have stories and going through some of the same feelings that I went through. Yes, it helps me to heal a lot.
I've known you for several years now. We met in a support group through PCI, and your story touches me every time I hear it, and your resilience of how you were able to get back up. All abuse is wrong, and it should never happen to anyone, but to have lost a member of your family to it, and to get back up and keep going and then pushing forward, it's inspiring, and it's a blessing to more people than you know. Tell me how long ago was that the event happened?
12 years ago.
12 years ago. And every year's rough, every holiday,
Yes.
birthdays. Vicki and I are friends on Facebook, so I see the post and the pictures, and your family's beautiful, and she's still a part of it. And what could we change? How do we change what's going on in society today so we don't have another victim? We share our stories. What's needed? What's missing? Do you have an idea?
It's a lot, and it's going to take all of us, not some of us, not one of us, not one story, but everybody's story needs to be heard. And when they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to stop this thing.
Right.
And I always say, prayer is the center of my healing. And it's going to take us to really get in depth with the awareness of domestic violence and try to, get people to change some things, even in the laws and stuff. We do a lot now, we bring the awareness, but we really need to open up about the signs, the warning signs and stuff even more, not only, for 1 month, but each and every day. It's going to take a lot. It takes a lot of pushing. And, as y'all do, Vicki, with PCI Project Celebration, y'all do a lot. I follow y'all a lot. I've, been in and out a lot with y'all, and y'all are on top of it. So it takes a lot of us.
Yes. As I said earlier, PCI is an organization. I started as a client there when I got back to Shreveport. I sought counseling and group support, and over the years, as I began to heal, I was able to volunteer with Project Celebration and help with events and bring up awareness, and was able to share my story through their events during October and April, it's truly helped me heal. I know not everybody is there. You know, some people might be there a year after the abuse. It might take someone else 20 years to get past the hurt. It's always going to hurt. It hurts sometimes even now when I bring up my own story. I think as survivors, we heal every day. You know, you wake up, something can trigger you. Well, you have to heal from that day. And when you wake up the next morning, by the grace of God, that hurt's gone. So I want to know what your future looks like as a survivor. What are you going to do tomorrow?
Tomorrow, you know, I take it a day at a time. You know, God wakes me up tomorrow, then I take it that day, that time, that moment, to get through. You know, I pray every morning. I study my word, and I often think about other people that's, you know, going through this and what I can do to make a difference in their life. And there's been many that have contacted me, many I've talked to, even recently, about, you know, they've lost their loved one to a domestic violence situation, and how I, you know, survive. It's not easy. It's a daily thing. Every day I think about my daughter. So it's a daily thing that you have to deal with. And a lot of what people don't know, I got depressed. I started having anxiety. I started having panic attacks. But I learned to survive. I had to get back up. Somebody needed my help. That's what, you know, what I kept hearing. Somebody needed my help. And through the agencies, you know, that helped me, and seeing the other ones, we hurt. You know, we are humans. And just like you, Vicki, I know your story, and I can feel your pain because I've been there. And as a mother, losing a child to domestic violence on a daily basis, it's a fight. It's a fight to keep your sanity, to keep going. But we can win. We can win. Tell your story. Talk about it. If you need to cry, cry. It's okay to cry. But you have to learn how not to stay there. The last 2 days, I shared with you the last 2 days, it's been a struggle with me. And, I had panic attacks. But I realized I can't stay here. This has to go. This can't, stay with me. I have work to do. So, to the parents and stuff, and the survivors, it's not easy, but we can get through it together. My thing is the support that I've had, and I still have, getting through it. I can call, pick up the phone, and say, "Hey, Vicki, I just want to talk." And it's not going to be a everyday thing. It might be a birthday, like you were saying, a holiday or something, but we get through it daily, little by little. We have to get through it. And I find myself praying more now. I never thought I'd become a minister. So, but I pray more just because, if I'm a minister, it doesn't mean that I don't go through. I pray more. In these last 2 days, she's been on my mind, and it's been hard, with the holidays coming up, and I made a mistake the other day to look at a video that was talked about, and once I looked at that video, the panic attack hit me instantly, because I couldn't wrap around my mind why I say, I love you, leave, I love you, I want nothing to happen to you, and you've been shot. So I had to really pick myself back up, even to be here today. So I brought, to support, and it just really inspired me when you asked me to be here, because I want, people to know that we hurt, we go through, it's not that 12 years later I don't feel anything, because I do, and I do daily.
I'll tell you, one of the most profound things I've done as a victim's advocate was I spoke a few years ago at a memorial service that PCI does every year. And during that time, I had been telling my stories a couple of years. I had gotten past the crying stage when I would tell my story, and I thought I was good. And I got up there, and I saw the pictures around me of the people who had lost their lives, and the thought, it hit me that I should have been on there. My picture was supposed to be up there, but the survivor's guilt that I felt for being there, what could I tell these people who had lost their family members? Because we would have the families there to memorialize their lost one. I was so humbled and at a loss for words. I think I sobbed through more of it than I actually spoke. But did you experience the guilt? Because we never go into having children thinking they're going to leave before we do.
Yes.
That made it really.
I totally blamed myself for a long time. And when I took the blame off myself, I blamed my husband. I blamed my family. I felt like I should have done more. What could I have done? When I did a first thing to give back to the community and the people that lived on the street, because they were so nice to my family during that time, the lady from Project Celebration came out, and she was talking about domestic violence. And when she got to the warning sign, and I'm listening to them, tears just started flowing. Mm-hmm. And after she finished, she came to me and asked me, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "All of those signs my daughter showed." I said, and I didn't know not one of them at the time. And I knew then that I had to see what these signs was. I had to do some study. I had to attend this and go there. But yes, that guilt trip is really hard. It's raw. Yeah, it's really rough. You have to really realize that it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I kept telling myself, it's not my fault. What did I do wrong, though? And I would go back, what did I do wrong? What I could have did different? Could I have sat on it and held her down? Could I have stopped her any kind of way from going? But it wasn't, I had to realize it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. But, Vicki, we do that so much, you know. As victims, we do that a lot. We put the blame on ourselves. And we have to realize it's not our fault.
And like you said, there's work to be done. And it's that getting up and going every day through our healing process, but yet trying to educate people on what the signs are. Statistically, I believe it's 1 in 4, and we'll hear more about updated numbers in a bit, but at one time it was 1 in 4 is a victim for women, and I believe it was 1 in 7 for men. But that's sitting in a restaurant. How many women are sitting there that you're looking at is a victim?
Right.
And victims don't always have scars or broken noses or black eyes. They look like the secretary or the executive of a company. You can't see when you look at a domestic violence victim, there's not one type of person you're looking at.
Right.
They're black, they're white, they're Native American, they're Asian, Hispanic. It covers every inch of this earth. I think since Corona, and it's been this worldwide pandemic, it's awful. None of us love it because we're all sick of being at home. And I thought I used to like being at home, but please get me out. But in being there, to me, it doesn't touch the pandemic we have in this world of domestic violence. Some cultures, they even believe it's okay to do that to another person. In America, we say we don't, but yet we will walk right past someone that's got black eyes or has a handprint on their arm. So you know that didn't get there by accident. You mentioned you're a minister, and we, through Dream, us being a spiritual ministry, also, and part of this came from you because I'd have never thought about a ministry until I met you, and and then it started growing. And God, I believe, puts people in each other's path because we need something that they can offer and learn from each other. And I've learned from you over the years a lot, probably more than you know, because we talk on Facebook, but
Right.
we see each other in October. It's like family reunion almost.
Yes.
And as survivors, it is a family.
It is.
Because we learn to lean on each other because we understand each other. Is there anything coming up that you have planned? I know you take one day at a time, but is there, I know with Corona, it's been hard. Are you, I know I said what's your future look like, and we talked about your single day. Do you have aspirations to write a book or to record your story? We know your story's been on TV. It was part of a television program not long ago, last year, I believe, or year before. And we're grateful that yours was one he solved. The detective was amazing. He's probably one of the best in Shreveport. He got everybody he wanted. But what's next for Vicki? I know you have grandchildren.
Yeah, what's next for me? Wow. My inspiration came from hearing others tell their story and talking about their children. And we came up with this thing, one of the ladies at PCI, called FADA, which is Families Against Domestic Violence. So that's on Facebook. I have been doing some writing, so hopefully soon I will have a book out. And it's kind of entitled The Why, because I looked at the why and I focused so much on why this happened, and realized that why was hurting me. So I've been doing some writing on it. Also, me and I call them my two play sisters are going to build what we call butterflies, which is for parents who have lost children to domestic violence. The reason why I call it butterfly because when I looked at the butterfly is in a cocoon. You know, you get a cocoon. So when this happened to my daughter, I went off to myself. And it was just me. You know, I'm in this dark room because I started getting depressed. And I had to come out sooner or later. So in the cocoon of that butterfly, then the caterpillar has to come out. And the caterpillar has to grow. And in order to grow, it has to be fed. It had, you know, to be fed in order to get bigger. But it goes back in there and becomes a great butterfly. So I looked at that as parents, as, you know, even survivors, when we go through this thing, we go through kind of like a butterfly and come out where our wings are fly. A butterfly is actually really strong. The wings are weak when you touch them. But think about those wings being so strong that they can carry that butterfly body, because the body part of the butterfly is really heavy. So the wings, we have to grow wings when we go through stuff like this and survivors in order to get out there to help others to tell their story. So I want to build that to help out, and anything for Project Celebration, I will. I want to see more churches get involved with this. Have your people out there. You see it reported. I do. Vicky, you did a thing with us last year, I believe. It might have been the year before last. With the painting, the canvas painting. Oh my God, y'all, if you missed it, you missed something big. Of course, we didn't know how to paint, but on this canvas, that once the paint hit it and you slide it, it makes such a beautiful picture. And that gave me so much joy, because we was in there doing something we didn't know how, but just to be together and sharing this and that and seeing what this paint do, those type of activities really help others. And I know it helped me. And I have my paintings on my wall, and I look at them and I get so tickled, because there was paint all over our feet, of course. And we had so much fun. We gathered together, and it wasn't only survivors. There was people in victim assistance in different places that was there to join us with our hurt and pain, and we turned that hurt and pain to something beautiful on that canvas. So doing things like that would really help. And I take my granddaughter and some of her teenage friends, and we talk about domestic violence. We talk about the signs, what to look for, and not only my daughter, my grandsons too. I want them to know, the signs.
Amazing. That has to happen.
Yeah, I encourage everyone, in their household, parents, to let them know about those warning signs, teach them, even teach them, how to build a safety plan to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've called me, Vicki. I have found a lady who was at the gas station. We've got to help her. Who do we call? And we get together on the phone and we call all our contacts, and because it's our job, but it's not our job, if you know what I mean. We're our sister's keepers.
Right.
We are here to help other people get out of what we've lived through. And I want to thank you for coming. Look forward to pouring with a twist with you again next year. Yes. COVID stopped it this year, but that's a dream. That's going to be Dream's thing. And I'm a full supporter of art therapy and helping express yourself and heal. And I am so appreciative that you came, and your picture popped up on my feed about a week ago as a memory. I was like, there's Vicki. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Vicki.
We will talk soon and do some coffee.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back shortly with our next segment. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your few minutes bathroom break, grabbed you something to drink. We're now back with Jadidra Williams, and she's a survivor. She's got amazing testimony of survival and rebirth to where she is now. And I've had the pleasure of speaking with you on many occasions through PCI events as victims sharing our stories. Jadidra, tell us about you.
I'm Jadidra, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence and sexual abuse. How I came into all of it first started when I was young. I started growing up. Of course, you say, this is not going to be me, but you never know if it's going to be you until you actually find yourself in a situation. Well, growing up in my younger years and not in some years back, I actually started going through domestic violence myself. I had a gun put to my head. I was burned with cigarettes. My money was took. I lost my job. He would physically assault me and then make me have sex with him. You name it. I then been through every form of abuse possible. Like I said, I started growing up. Never thought it would be me, but when it became me, of course, I didn't leave right away. I stayed in the situation, and then this was with multiple people, by the way. So the first situation, I was able to get away from it, and just didn't ever think that it would happen again. But then it happens again, and you find yourself in a situation, and on the average, it takes a woman 7 times to leave, but it took me more than that. The final straw for me was when I was like, it was in that moment I wanted him dead, because I just felt like at that moment it was me or him. So I proceeded to do something, but then, I don't know, there was something that just told me don't do it.
Right.
There were no reports. What if I killed this person? I'll go to jail. What happened to my kids? Or what if he killed me? You just never know what could happen. So in that moment, I decided, you know what? I deserve better than this. And I always knew I deserved better, but, I stayed. But I decided me and my kids deserve to see better, to know better, to feel better. And in that moment, I was like, okay, it's just time to walk away, and I never looked back. And then I started getting help with recovery because there was a lot of trauma, anxiety, I'm sure depression. I've never been diagnosed with it, but I know what the symptoms are, so I definitely went through that. And Project Celebration has been a tremendous help with my healing. I started using my voice to tell my story, to help people know that, there's somewhere you can go to get help, because I didn't know about Project Celebration before any of this. And so finding out about them made me start doing research to find about all the services in the community. There are a lot of great services. A lot of people don't know about some of these places. So I use my mission. My mission is to let people know where they can go to get help. Also know that they're not alone, and know that you don't have to feel shame or guilty about any of the things you went through because it wasn't your fault.
Right.
So.
And you said this happened multiple times. It wasn't a one-time deal.
Mm-hmm.
Did you seek legal help when it happened?
So, with one of the people I did not, and there was actually people in the house when I had the gun put to my head, but I'm guessing they was afraid because nobody called for help. He just came in. I'm not sure if he was drunk or had been on drugs or what, but he came in And it started with an argument, and then the next thing you know, I'm standing in the kitchen with a gun in my head.
Right.
And then he eventually put the gun down, and like ain't nothing ever happened.
I know your stories because, like I said, we shared them before.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about sitting there watching the news one night? Can you share that? If not, that's okay.
I can.
Okay.
Okay, so I was sitting one night watching the news, and a familiar face came over the news, and
Thank you.
it was somebody I knew from my past. It was somebody I knew from my past. It was actually my neighbor who lived across the street. He was on the news for 2 counts of molestation and 1 forcible rape. His name is Steven. He sexually assaulted me multiple times, and I never told nobody about it. I was in I want to say my late 20s, because I'm 33 now. My late 20s, this happened when I was about 14. I never told a soul about it. He asked me not to tell. And of course, he wasn't the first person to sexually assault me. I was actually sexually assaulted when I was about 4 or 5 as well by my mom's husband at the time, but her ex-husband now, of course. But I saw Steven on the news, and it just brought back everything that happened to me, and I felt guilty because it happened to them, and I never told anybody. I kind of just blocked it out all these years, and just never said nothing. The only reason why I think it stopped because he went to jail for something unrelated, but that's the only reason why I believe it stopped. But it wasn't like he just snatched me like in a dark alley or if I was just walking. He groomed me. He gained my trust. He used his kids even to get me to his house. But in that moment, I knew I had to do something about it. My kid's dad actually reached out to Miss Brittany, and she told us about Project Celebration. I contacted Project Celebration. I spoke with Angela. Angela had me to come in, and she was a true blessing. They got me set up with counseling. They even made me aware of who the detective was on the case. Once I went through 5 of those 6 sessions, I decided, okay, now I'm ready to say something. So I contacted the detective. He came to my house. We did the interview, and at the end, he asked me if I wanted to press charges. If it wasn't for Angela, my kid's dad, or Detective Bell, believing me, because it had happened so many years ago.
Right.
If they wouldn't have believed me, then where would I be now? But they believed me. I got the help I needed. I testified against him. He's doing 57 years in jail for 2 counts of molestation. But the other 2 girls, but me being there and others being there to say that happened to them too, was able to get him put behind bars. And I go on to, create Raise Your Voice and start sharing my story, doing different events. I had an event down in front of the courthouse called Shades of Purple, even though it's for domestic violence, but it was the start of me using my voice to help other people in hopes of bringing other people who may have sexual assaulted forward or just did anything too, but also anybody who's just going through it, and it wasn't necessarily about him. And from there, I started volunteering with Project Celebration, and I met you and all these other amazing people, and now I work for Project Celebration. Right. And so it's definitely been a roller coaster, but I never thought I'd be sitting here doing what I'm doing now, doing the work I do on any of it, because I always walked around with my head down. My self-esteem was low, so to see him on the news that night and bring me into what I'm supposed to be doing in life and find my purpose, it's been very rewarding. Yes, yes.
He moved it from something that was meant to destroy you to survivor and thriving and leading other women and men. It happens to men. I don't want to discount them. And you mentioned Raise Your Voice. That's your website, your page, and you always have encouraging memes and things there. So join her page. Keep up. We over the years we've done interviews. I think I've done all my TV interviews with you,
Right.
Which has always been helpful. I'm the quiet one, and you said you always walked around with your head down, and mine was too. And slowly every year it gets a little higher. But going through those interviews with you, and I've always been amazed at how you have grown, even just over these last few years. You know, it's God's worked a miracle, and I'm so glad you work for PCI. You're a blessing to them because there's a new victim out there that needs your story and your help. When I asked this of Vicki earlier when Vicki and I were talking, we were part of this club,
Right.
and we meet once a year in October for family reunion, and but it is a family because once you've gone through this and you share, you say something to somebody, well then you might not hear from somebody for a year, but then they pick up the phone and go, I know you need to hear this person and talk to this person because they're a survivor. And it's kind of like how Tula and I met. It wasn't, you don't have a building you go to for survivors to hang out in. You have to seek each other out, and it's hard to do because sometimes you don't even want to leave the house yourself.
Right.
But, what's next for you? What is your next step in helping survivors? I mean, you made a huge one now that you work for PCI, but for Jadidra, what's next? Do you have a dream that's coming?
I do. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but I am working on some courses and some different things to further my knowledge of DV and sexual abuse and child abuse. I'm also working on planning events and creating things to sell for awareness, to give back to the community, to help families of domestic violence.
Awesome work. Awesome. I wish you well in that. Can't wait to see what you have for sale. So, you mentioned you have kids. What do you tell them? Because yours are little. Yours are pretty small. What do they know, or do you address DV with them?
So they always make little jokes here and there, and they be like, she's a survivor of domestic violence, or she helped her community, those type of things. But growing up, I wasn't talked to about what sexual assault was, what it looked like. If somebody do this to you, tell me. So they know what inappropriate touches is. And you know how sometimes kids play and they might pop each other on the butt or something. Well, that happened one day, and they was like, Mom, he touched me inappropriately, and I was like, what happened? And that's what happened. So I know that I'm giving them what they need, and in hopes of them coming to me or just going to anybody and saying something happened to them. I didn't really feel like I had nobody to tell or to talk to. I just was always this shy, quiet person, and so I just talk to them in terms of them understanding that if any of this ever happens, this is what you should do. And even if you don't tell me, trust to tell it to. Because that'd be a lot of people's cases they're afraid of, being judged or talked about or you may make fun of or whatever. So I know that I am, doing good with them because any little thing they come and tell me, even if it's something really petty, but the fact that you do that makes me know that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, yesterday, in fact, I had an incident in my back seat of my children, and the girl pinched my son on the rear end, and his response was, "That's not okay." And she's a little younger than him, and and he acted like he was going to hit her, and I'm like, "That's not okay."
Right.
And so it's, you want them to learn. You don't want to give them the scary, gory details, because that can scar someone. But yeah, you have to introduce it in little doses, and I hate to say it, but it's almost like a reversal of grooming. We have to groom them, right, so that they're aware if something starts happening, what this person is trying to do to them. Right. So you have to beat the perpetrator to the punch. And so I said it earlier, I'm amazed and in awe of how much you've grown, and what you do and bring to our community is awesome in God's work. July, do we have any questions, or do you have any?
So far, there's no questions from the live chat. I think, I want to see how I can word this, but I think the question that I have is, when you come across a survivor and they're in absolute trauma, what is the first steps you advise them to take?
I asked them, what do they do when they find themselves triggered, or what do they do for self-care? Because self-care is definitely important, or recognizing the triggers and knowing what to do to reverse them. But also, getting them set up with counseling is a huge thing, because a lot of people don't know that you can develop PTSD or trauma from anything. It doesn't have to be being in the military. It can be from any trauma you ever experienced in life, no matter if you was 5 years old, 12 years old, or even now. Things have a way of coming back and triggering you. It can be the smell of something, it can be a song, it can be anything. So definitely getting the help and not feeling like because you're getting help that there's something wrong with you. You have to know that help is available and it's okay to ask for help. So those are some of the things. And even with myself doing this work, I have to see my counselor. So domestic violence and sexual assault has a long-lasting effect on you. And do I feel like this will ever go away? No. But I feel like as long as I continue to move forward and get the help that's out there available, and some of the help is free, so don't ever feel like because you don't have insurance or different things, different barriers, that you can't get the help you need. So
Yeah, there's organizations that can help you with counseling or protective orders and things like that. So yeah, definitely I agree. Seek help, and if they can't help you, they know somebody who can. It's this trickle down effect, and one of the reasons we wanted to share this today, this live stream, is we want the community to know what's available, and we're appreciative to news channels that put it out there, but we know the news is 30 minutes long, and so the segment links they can apply to a certain organization or cause is limited, and we're not really limited. We can talk till 10 o'clock if we want,
right.
and every time I held my phone, I was being watched. I was never allowed to answer my phone, but I could scroll and I could see what was happening around. And, you know, so see, social media is there. Though I might not could have called, I could have seen what he's doing is this sign of domestic violence. I've seen a post recently of kind of some of the ideas you need for safety planning. And in my escape, if I had known that and seen it, then I would have maybe left sooner because I'd have known how to plan it. And so I think social media, I'm computer illiterate, but I see its good sides. We all know it has a dark side, but we're fixing to take over and use it for good. And I appreciate you coming, representing yourself and your new job. Congratulations. I know you've been there now for a little while, but we haven't seen each other in a while. So, is there anything in October, real short, in our few minutes left, that is happening at PCI that the public can, participate in?
Yes, so okay, so October the 22nd is the memorial. It's a day-long memorial where you light a candle in remembrance of someone who lost their life to domestic violence. On October the 22nd, we have the gender-based violence Women of Color panel that's going to be on Facebook Live through Project Celebration page. And then I want to say October the 30th, which is a Friday, the day before Halloween, we have to put a nail in it where you paint one of your nails purple and you post it on Facebook and you hashtag put a nail in it, DVM 2020. So that's what we have coming up. Because of COVID, of course, everything is virtual this year, but being and trying to stay proactive is doing it virtually. And we also have toolkits that are available. The purple bags with the candle, the nail polish, and different things in it, the brochures of our services and everything we have to offer if anybody want to call and stop by and get one.
I'll be by this week. I did not know that. And we're going to wrap up for a short time. We're going to take a break in our live stream, and we'll be back live shortly with the next guest. Thank you, Jadidra, for joining us. And we're going to have to restart the stream. Please join us when we